Now,
Yes.
I'll be talking about percutaneous radiofrequency ablation for bone tumors. It is quite an overlapping topic between the interventional radiologists and the orthopedic oncosurgeons. But in our institute, it is usually the orthopedic oncosurgery team which is managing them. So, radiofrequency ablation is a form of thermal ablation for killing tumor cells. It is the treatment of choice for benign bone tumors such as osteoid osteoma and other benign conditions such as chondroblastoma, osteoblastoma, giant cell tumors in certain situations, as well as in a palliative setting for metastatic and myeloma lesions. So doing it under image guidance, especially CT, is critical to success, and it is preferred over other imaging modalities such as fluoroscopy or MRI because it provides faster imaging acquisition and has a better anatomic resolution of the bone tissue. Can be done in a percutaneous method most of the times. Case selection is crucial. So case in point is this 6 years old boy who presented to us with pain in the hip region for the past 3 months. The child had a typical history of pain at night, which was relieved on NSAIDs. So usually a CT is a clincher for diagnosis as far as osteoid osteoma is concerned. So the child had X-ray, MRI done from outside. We got a CT done. So we can see a typical nidus in the inferior part of the femoral neck region, in the calcar region. And this is the basic instrumentation which is required for doing a radiofrequency ablation. We need grounding pads, K-wires, we need a drill, Jamshedi needles, RF probe, and of course a RF generator. So this is the setup. We do it under general anesthesia or laryngeal mask airway in the CT scan suite itself. Localization of the lesion with the CT scan is very important for planning our approach, access and relationship to the neurovascular bundle. So once that is done, skin marking and standard plating and draping is done. We introduce a K-wire. Either it can be introduced freehand, checked under CT scan, or if we are entering through the contralateral cortex, as was in this case, we can make it enter through a drill. Once we have reached up to the lesion, a Jamshedi needle, the cannula of the Jamshedi needle, usually an 8 gauge one, is cannulated over the K-wire, and then we enter into the lesion. In case, because of extensive perilesional sclerosis, we are not able to enter into the lesion, we can use a drill to enter the lesion. We take biopsy from there, and once we are done with that, then we do the parking of the radiofrequency ablation probe into the nidus of the lesion. So this is a very critical step. Ensuring the intranidal position of the RF probe is very important for a successful radiofrequency ablation for osteoid osteoma, as we can see in the second figure, that the RF probe has been positioned into the nidus. Then retracting the cannula of the Jamshedi needle is another critical step because the cannula can transmit heat into the surrounding tissue. So we have to retract it at least by 5 to 6 centimeters in order to avoid heat transmission to the surrounding tissue. So once that is done, we have ensured the intranidal position. Standard ablation is carried out for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. We have to reach a temperature of around 90 degrees Celsius, which is maintained for about 4 to 5 minutes. So once the ablation is over, we again do a CT scan to reconfirm the intranidal position of the probe before switching it off. So the average duration of the procedure after the anesthesia is around 30 to 40 minutes. Analgesics are continued for around 24 to 48 hours. In case of older children, it can be done as a daycare procedure. Walking is allowed from the next day and running after 6 weeks. So another case, osteoid osteoma in a similar location, this time in a 7-year-old boy. We can see in the CT images that we have entered into the lesion, RF probe into the nidus, carry out the RF ablation, and this is at 1 month. The child was actually not walking and was walking with a limp before the procedure, and at 1 month, the child is totally pain-free and able to carry out all his routine activities. Another case scenario is this time in a rather rarer location in the supraacetabular region, although it has been reported osteoid osteoma in the pelvis, and supraacetabular region is the most common site. So we again plan the RFA in the standard protocol, and so this is the function at the end of 1 month. Histology confirmed it to be an osteoid osteoma. So in this case, we can see this is a rather rarer location for an osteoid osteoma. The intramedullary, most of the times either it is intracortical or subperiosteal. The patient actually had 2 MRIs done from outside, and the radiologists were not very clear that whether it was a Brodys abscess or an osteoid osteoma. We can proceed with a biopsy first in these cases and do the definitive procedure later on. Another way is we can do a bone scan, which is usually a clincher if we have to differentiate infection from osteoid osteoma. A bone scan on an osteoid osteoma will show a hotter spot within the hot area, whereas a Brodys abscess will show a central reduced uptake area of purulent material and not a hotter spot within a hot spot. So we did the RF ablation, and this is the function at 1 month. So some technical inputs as far as percutaneous CT guide RFA is concerned. So we have case selection is very important. The size of these lesions is very critical in relation to the kind of needle we are using, because as we can see in the first figure, there is a zone of ablation where we are able to effectively burn the lesion up to, it depends on the diameter of the needle, so also about the length of the needle. So in most of the standard needles, we are able to ablate area of about 3 centimeters. Recently, these special RF probes have been introduced. The multi-prong or the tined electrodes, which expand into an umbrella-like design once we have entered into the lesion for even bigger lesions up to 5 centimeter. Length of the needle also has it also affects the same. And even if we are not having these multi-prong electrodes, we can use a single needle electrodes and do ablation at multiple sites. So as far as percutaneous RFA is concerned, it is an established technique for benign bone lesions, as we have seen in osteoid osteoma, especially in the extra spinal locations. For the spinal locations, we do still prefer minimally invasive surgery, osteoblastoma and chondroblastoma, and it is a safe, effective, quick, no lengthy recovery is involved, no blood loss, much of blood loss, and success rate for the primary procedure is around 95%. For a secondary, if we are not able, if the lesion is not ablated in the first sitting, for the second ablation, the success rate is almost around 100%. Limitations can be constrained as far as this procedure is concerned, but when we compare it to an open procedure, the pros obviously weigh far more as far as the cons are concerned. And if we have an in-house ablation machine, the cost can be considerably reduced. So as far as the completeness of ablation is involved, yes, there are no certain factors where we can ensure that the lesion has been completely ablated, because clinical parameters like subsidence of symptoms like pain, it usually happens after 24 to 48 hours. There are no immediate radiological parameters. Yes, in an institutional or a teaching institute, we can do a pre-procedure PET scan and a post-procedure PET scan to see the reduction in SUV, but that again adds to the cost and logistical problems. Thanks for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jayaldeep. It's a very nice presentation.